New venture capital flows. Indian venture capital is now zeroing in on what perhaps was always a relative strength in India, a capability to manufacture products from small to large size factories in areas ranging from chemicals and garments to spectacle lenses and much more. Moreover, India has untapped capacity, both in human resources and manufacturing capacity. And finally, there is increasing amounts of Indian capital to fund it all. The Indian venture ecosystem in the past has been majorly driven by Western capital, which usually determined the direction of its flow and, to some extent, recklessness in companies or startups which are either similar or direct replicas of successes elsewhere. E commerce, ride sharing, and edtech are good examples, most of these ventures having come to grief for all concerned. Now that's changing. To find out how and how much, I caught up with Sudhir Sethi of Chiratae Ventures, one of the oldest venture firms in India and earlier known as IDG Ventures. Chiratae started in 2006 and manages around $1.15 billion of assets in about 6 funds. Chiratae also claims a portfolio revenue of $3 billion today, of which 25% comes from international markets in 19 countries, it says. And more significantly, at least from my vantage point, its investee companies today have about 15 manufacturing units, including grabbing some potential shifts out of China as a key focus area. Chiratae has also announced its 5th venture tech fund. I began by asking Sudhir Sethi, founder and chairman of Chiratae Ventures, how his first investment was doing today before going along to his latest ones.
We turned 17 on September 1st. It's been an amazing journey full of excitement. And I think the reason why excitement exists is obviously because of the past, but more so because how we see the next 10 years and 15 years. For the first time in private equity and venture capital, India is facing a tailwind for the last 6-7 years, especially after COVID. We found that 70% of our companies did better than pre-COVID. And the reason was that businesses which were losing money were shut down. New products came in during that time. Innovation went to a high. Companies became more agile. So did VCs. And that's a very heady combination when VCs and founders get together and do the right thing overall. Today, where we are is we manage about $1.1 billion worth of AUM, 133 companies funded, 48 exits. The revenue of our companies is $3 billion and 25% comes from outside the country. We also have given exits of approximately $800 million. We should reach $1 billion next year. And we are the only firm in the country to have done this 12 years in a row. Obviously, investments is a big thing for us. The first investment we made was a company called Manthan in whole space of retail analytics. We came out after 5 years, and I still remember it's very dear to us for the simple reason that it gave us good returns. But more important, we met the founder, a very good founder, Atul. And I think what followed was Myntra, what follows was Flipkart in some sense, and then Lenskart and FirstCry, today CureFit, and many, many other companies. Effectively, because India is the land of entrepreneurs. There is no question about it overall.
Right. And so you said retail analytics was your first investment. And is that business in general or specific still around?
Yes, I think they got merged with another company and it's under a different name, but yes, it's still around.
Right. Okay. So let me ask you about some of your manufacturing investments. And you've got quite a few there. And what are some of the more notable ones?
So I think it's important to put the manufacturing in context. We, in the last 7 to 8 years, have had a feeling, if I may say, or a view that India, with technology coming in, and especially after 2016, when the digital public infrastructure started building up, there is one element of the digital public infrastructure amongst many, UPI, which today has 350 million people using digital payments, and compared to about 70 million credit cards. So effectively, 5 years from now or 6 years from now, we will have about 750 million people in India using digital payments. Now, what that gives us is an ability to reach population scale in the country for new companies which have never existed before. None of the companies which we have in any form, whether a business model, revenue model, technology, or product existed before. I named a few as such. Now, if that is the case, then how do you reach 1 billion people? And the TAM shot up. For us, the TAM shot up because the targeted addressable market today is 1 billion people who need insurance, 1 billion people who need loans, billion people who need very healthy food as such. And the list goes on. 300 million students who need good education, 150 million farmers, 70, 80 million SMEs in the country. So if that is the case, how do you reach this big TAM? Now, if you look at some of our companies or the consumer market, at best, if you look at even large companies like Flipkart or Amazon, they've possibly addressed the consumer, maybe 150 million consumers in the country or thereabouts. Some of our companies like FirstCry, Lenskart, are in the 10 to 25, 30 million consumers. And if you can build a 500 million company with only addressing 10 to 30 million consumers in the country, the question is, how do you reach the next 30 million or the next 50 million or the next 100 million? And I'm talking about consumer as a proxy to even B2B markets. Now, if we want to address as a VC and companies want to address the next 50 million consumers, the same product doesn't work. Pricing, it doesn't work. And if, let's say, a Lenskart glass is at 750 rupees and the next 50 million people need this at perhaps 650 rupees or 500 rupees, to increase margins, you have to focus into vertical, which is manufacturing, supply chain, logistics, and warehousing. That's where margins have to be squeezed out, not from the front end of consumer acquisition costs or reducing marketing cost. It is the back end. Now, the moment you go to back end, manufacturing becomes very important. So you have to redesign the product and execute it through manufacturing. And then you have to go to these new markets where you have to say, look, great product for you. It's cheaper. The company is also increasing margins. And so to that extent, manufacturing in the physical world became very important. Today, out of all our companies put together, we have 15 manufacturing units under Lenskart, under FirstCry, under Global Bees, Miko, consumer robotic product, and the list goes on. If I look at even food as an example, I think food is a proxy to manufacturing. The large cloud kitchens are really manufacturing. If you make from order to delivery 30 minutes, and out of that, if 20 minutes is spent in making a food which is ordered, and it's for 20 minutes, you can make it in 15 minutes or 10 minutes, then SOPs have to be applied. So we have 15 factories. Lenskart is the world's largest manufacturing of eyeglasses in the world today. So we have global scale manufacturing being set up in India by startups which have never existed before. And that, I think, is the future.
So as you look ahead, how do you see the composition of your portfolio changing? I mean, with what you just spoke of, the manufacturing part, and let's say what the government is trying to do, what the geopolitical kind of opportunities are offering themselves, like the China plus one and so on.
Well, I think entrepreneurs look at what they need. Entrepreneurs are serving a consumer or a B2B customer with the right product, high quality at the right margins with enormous amount of quality there. Now, I don't think entrepreneurs are thinking of geopolitical issues. They're thinking of how to become a large company and survive and do well and become a leader. Steps of leadership, dominant in Indian market and a global scale. Just to prefix the answer to your question, out of our 3 billion revenue, 25% is international revenue in 19 countries. And why global is important is because the same product which sells for 100 rupees in India can be sold outside the country for 300 rupees, purely because of pricing markets which are very different.
What's an example of a product?
No, I think if you take maybe eyeglasses, right? If it is 750 rupees here, it doesn't need to be 750 rupees outside the country because the costs are higher. And definitely the same product which is manufactured in India, the pricing can be higher. I mean, if you look at even Apple products, they're different price in different markets, whether it is a Japan or a US, the market's pricing is very different. So coming back, I think what we see as investing, let's take history a bit. There are 3 phases of investing since the last 15, 16 years. The first phase was basically more efficient companies. If there was retail in the market space, physical retail, it was inefficient, and entrepreneurs came out and created vertical and horizontal efficient retail, which is online and which is stores, and now technology platforms going to general trade. So basically retail was a big thing. Now later on came B2B, again introducing efficiencies in supply chain. Then came efficiencies in manufacturing, which happened in the last 6-7 years, where you saw companies, as I mentioned, like FirstCry, Lenskart, Miko, and others, Global Bees, starting manufacturing units, which would improve the margins and high-end quality. You can't build a long-term company on traded products. Today, I think, is phase 2 and 3. The phase 2 will run as we move forward at a scale. Phase 3 has come up. So I'll give you examples of phase 3. There's a company called Minus Zero. which we have in Bangalore. And that minus zero is India's only autonomous driving company. We have a company called KB Colors, which is one of the world's few companies, few means one or two, who are extracting color out of bacteria to replace chemical colors. There's a company called Aether, which makes robotic self-learning AI arms for people who don't have upper limbs. And it's an amazing product sold worldwide. And again, the list goes on. So pure technology products, which have never existed in India before. And today, India is producing some of those which have never existed in the world. That our companies today have applied for over 100 patents, has been granted 30 patents. And that's a holy grail in terms of the quality of technology, entrepreneurship, and technology coming out from India.
Right. Last question. So, you perhaps among many venture capital firms in the country have the highest proportion of domestic capital invested into you. So, do you see that changing further in favor of domestic, or say staying the same, or reversing in coming days or months?
So we started out in 2006 wanting decision making in India, being an Indian firm. We have a very strong advisory board, Mr. Ratan Tata, Chris Gopalakrishnan, Manish Choksi, Bruno Rochelle, Ken Oshinawa, Puneet Pushkarna, and a few others, Dr. Hettig from Germany. The reason why we started raising capital is because in every market, there is local capital. So let's be clear, there is local capital. China last year was 80% local capital in the venture space. Before that was 60%. What does local capital do? Local capital has experience. Local capital has built industry in the past. And to that extent, their family offices, their corporates, banks are local capital, insurance companies are local capital. So for us, for the industry, I think it's about 15%. In the last 5 years, India has absorbed $280 billion worth of capital in private equity and VC. Exits 140 billion. We believe in the next 5 years, this will be something like 450 billion. And right now, Indian capital is only 15%. Host of reasons. One of them is knowledge about this asset class is low right now. We started out in this journey 2013 because we needed, and international capital was not looking at India in a big way. So today for us, 50% of every fund is Indian capital. And that to me will stay for us, but the industry will go from 15% to possibly 40% in the next 10 years.
Right. Sudhir, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you.